And just an FYI, I've got some content here, but please know that my presentation style is pretty casual. And so if you have questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm happy to stop and answer questions and have dialogue as we go. Same thing if you have a best practice that we're missing or a suggestion that's worked for your organization, we'd love to hear that as well. Again, my name is Lisa Runkle. I'm coming to you today just outside of Boulder, Colorado, where our River Network offices are headquartered. I am originally from Minnesota and grew up on the water there, and then moved to Colorado about 4 years ago with my whitewater rafting guide. And you can see here myself and my 3 kiddos on the Colorado River, which is one of our favorite floats. I've been in philanthropy for 17 years. I've worked for small nonprofits all the way to the Nature Conservancy, where I worked for 7 years before joining River Network. So I can empathize with both sides of that coin. We're a small shop here at River Network. There's only 2 of us on the philanthropy side. We engage our executive director and a development committee, but 2 full-time staff here. So I see lots of you are in that same size in the chat. So hopefully this will resonate with you today as well. So here are our goals today for this session. I hope I can provide some encouragement, best practices. We'll do some group sharing. Please don't log off. I promise I won't put you in any breakout rooms. It's more if you have suggestions or ideas that I don't cover that I would love your involvement in this session. We're going to give you some tools to plan, and then at the very end, identify some immediate action items and allow you to leave today with some next steps. So we've had this going in the chat, but if you haven't answered yet, share with us where you're joining from, the name of your organization, and the size of your fundraising staff. And certainly, you know, we're all about collaboration and network at River Network. So if you see folks in the chat that you'd like to reach out to, please feel free to use the chat function that way. There's certainly a lot of room for collaboration in the fundraising and development world. And so if you see someone that looks like they have a similar size organization or they happen to be in your region, we welcome you to make those connections today as well. So a quick reminder as we get started, I shared these in a session that I held in the spring where we talked about best practices of fundraising in a crisis, just as COVID was kind of under our feet and here in the United States. But I think these are really relevant anytime. Just a reminder to be authentic, to be vulnerable with your communications, to be flexible. We're going to talk about plans today, but one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is to have a plan B or to just not hold tightly to those plans and know that you might have to shift and adapt, sometimes quickly. To trust your gut. I think there's a lot of room for intuition and experience right now in fundraising where we feel and we know the right thing to do. And so I'd encourage you to trust your gut. There's a lot of noise out there right now from different entities. And so, you know, absorb what you'd like, including this, but know and trust your experience and your gut. Giving grace, we're all human. I think, you know, we're 6-7 months into this wild and crazy time. And I think if you've read anything about kind of pandemic exhaustion, I think a lot of us are there. A reminder that you don't need from me that these are wild times. I typed unprecedented to begin with and then decided not to use that word because we're probably all pretty sick of it at this point. To give yourself grace. From now to the end of the year is a big push in the fundraising world. Plan in that rest time, plan in the downtime, find a new hobby if you need to. I'm just a big believer in finding balance when you can. And I think you'll be a better fundraiser and your organization will be better for it if you can give yourself grace and find those rest times. And a reminder that mindset matters. Like I said, there's a lot of noise out there. I've been reading a lot of articles about, different folks, Chronicle of Philanthropy, AFP, all of these big organizations that are polling fundraisers, and it's all doom and gloom about how fundraising is going to be down this year, and that's all fine and good, but I would just encourage you that mindset matters. If you go into this season with a mindset that you are going to rock it and you're going to do the best you can and that you're excited about it, that's going to ripple out through your organization and to your donors as well. So if you're not in that space, I would encourage you to find ways to get excited and to be positive about what's around the corner. So Brenna's going to put up a poll for us. I'm curious what your biggest challenge or obstacle is when you think about end of the year giving. Not enough time, not enough staff, don't have a plan, don't have enough resources. Should I know what end of year giving is and why it's important, which is totally fine if you're there too. I want to make sure I have a good sense of where we are with this group as we proceed. Not enough
Lisa,
time.
I added that last question just for some levity.
Yeah, no, that's.
And for
That's
those
perfect.
that are selecting other, if you could put in the chat box, if you feel comfortable, so what you feel that biggest challenge or obstacle is, we would love to capture that. Have about 75% of people that have voted. So if you haven't had the chance yet to fill out the poll, feel free to do so. Other than your responses going to the chat, this is completely anonymous. So no worries about anybody seeing your answers. And then we will close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Lisa, the results should be on your screen.
Perfect. So we've got 47%, 8 of you, not enough time is your biggest challenge. 18%, not enough staff. Those two are probably related. 12% don't have a plan, 12% not enough resources, and then 12% other. And I see Casey shared with us in the chat, one example of other is concerns over how to leverage our challenges and needs against organizations that have a COVID-19 community response that is receiving greater aid. Casey, I'll address that in this presentation. That's a great challenge. I've heard that throughout this pandemic. I talked about that actually in my presentation this spring about best practices during a crisis. So I'll make sure to address that as well. And then Kathy shared, we have lots and lots of very small donors, no idea who among them might be able to give more and don't have time, staff to find out. Yep, we'll get there as well, Kathy. I've got some things in here about segmenting, and we'll address that as well. Wonderful, thank you. It's good to just have a sense of where folks are. So let's talk about best practices in this crazy and wild time as we approach the end of the year giving season. I would encourage you to focus on donor retention and stewardship. Are you communicating and loving on your donors as much as you feel like you should, or do you feel like your donors are feeling that way? If not, now is the perfect time to show gratitude and the impact of their support, whether or not they've given yet this year. Great to thank donors, even if they are lapsed in your organization, and show the impact of that support. That could be an annual report. It could be a quick one-pager. It could be a thank you video from your CEO or executive director. We've been shooting those, asking our CEO, Nicole Silk, to just shoot those on her iPhone. These don't have to be, produced videos. It actually feels really personal and authentic when they're done that way. And so easy to send that over text if you have your donor's cell phone number, or via email, just so they have that personal touch from your organization and your CEO. It could be also a video from your program staff, from the people on the front line, showing a quick day in the life, or just a quick thank you, and reminding these folks about what their dollars and how their dollars are making an impact on your organization.
Hey, Lisa, before
Yeah,
you move on, we have a question about the river. What picture is that in your slide?
that's a great question. We have a photo bank here at River Network, and I pulled from there.
Fair enough.
I am not sure. Great question. I'd love to go there. It looks wonderful. So again, just showing gratitude and the impact of those dollars. Simplify your message. There's a lot of noise right now, right? There's all these Zoom calls and email, and we're all trying to do things virtually. What can you do to simplify your message to make it narrow and succinct, but yet focused, so that you can grab people's attention? Be transparent. This is the time to tell folks how COVID-19 has impacted your organization. So Casey, this is some of what I think you were asking. While you may not be able to compare apples to apples to a health nonprofit or a food bank or organizations like that that are seen as frontline in the COVID crisis, we still need to talk about our organization's impact and the impact that COVID-19 has had on our organization. So are your services down because donations are down this year? Can you give a percentage of what that looks like for your organization? So something like, as of today, we're down 20% in our donations over last year. Would you help us make that back today, or decrease that number today so we can continue to, and then XXX is your impact? Or maybe you're down in the number of people or projects that you're able to do. Quantify those numbers for people and be transparent. It's not going out and trying to make a crisis out of your organization, but you do have something likely that's going on in your organization that is relevant to you. Share that with your donors. It's not up to us to decide if that's relevant. It's up to the donor, but we need to provide the opportunity for them to know exactly what our organization is going through and what the impact of those lost dollars or lost programming or lost projects means. Hopefully that's helpful. This kind of ties in with that. Don't make assumptions. I think, you can read reports, like I said, and hear about the bad news about donations, but let's not make assumptions about our donors and our donor database. Again, it's our job as fundraisers to provide the opportunities for these donors to enact their values through their philanthropy. They have supported your organization at some point for some reason. Let's give them the opportunity and tell these stories of impact and let them decide how they're going to choose to navigate their philanthropy this year. Cross-promote ways to give. This is a perfect time while you're in front of folks to think about those different donor segments. And I forget who asked this question, but this would be relevant to that. So as an example, if you have a pool of donors that you would consider your annual donors, and that's a different level for every organization, right? We consider at River Network a major gift to be $1,000 or more. So let's call our annual donors the under 1,000 group. Can we pool those donors and segment those donors and encourage them to consider setting up a monthly donation? So let's say they're giving $10 a year. Would they consider giving $10 a month? In the same way, let's look at those monthly donors that your organization already has. Is now a good time to send a message about planned giving? Lots of folks are thinking about their estate plans right now. We know that your loyal donors are those that have given year over year or that are giving on a monthly basis, regardless of amount. Can you weave that message about planned giving into those communications? On the flip side, can you ask your planned giving donors to give an annual gift if they haven't yet this year, to enact their values now so that they can see the impact of their dollars now? And then we'll get to this a little bit later, but I also encourage you, if you aren't reaching out specifically to those donors who have a donor advised fund, now is a great time to do that as well. We know what the stock market's been doing. While it's been a little lumpy overall, people seem to be doing well in their investments, and those with donor advised funds have, in most cases, more money than they have in years past. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later, but put them on your list as a segment as well. and then make a plan. We'll get to this later. I'll get to some specifics on it. But if you don't have a written plan that you can share with your colleagues, that you can share with your board, that you can share with your volunteers, let's work on that between now and November 1st and get that in writing so it's easily shared, that you can plug people in and help you along the way. Any questions, Brenna? I've seen the chat light up, but I can't. I haven't had time to bump over and see if there's any questions.
No questions other than the river, which Adam, just FYI, I did send a message to our marketing staff to see if it's one of ours or just part of the bank that we have. And then Casey was just thanking you for that thank you video idea. Really good ideas that you came up with. Thank you.
Great. Are there any best practices that we missed? Does anyone want to hop on video and share anything from that last list that they think should be included as a best practice before we move forward? Would love to hear any other ideas or thoughts or feedback that you have. Feel free to do so in the chat as well. All right, Brenna, I'll have you keep an eye on that just in case.
Yep.
And our next poll, we've heard about this already from a few folks, but I'm curious if you have an end of the year giving plan.
Well, there's a poll on the screen. I love that folks are enjoying the Brenna threw in a question to make everybody laugh and smile on a webinar question.
I mean, it's relevant, Brenna. We're getting quite a few. We're getting quite a few folks choosing that option.
I wrote an entire strategic plan on a napkin in a restaurant once, at least the beginning parts of one. So
it's awesome.
Give it just a few seconds longer in case anyone walked away really quick and wants to answer the question.
Casey asked a question in the chat, ideas for leveraging our need for supporting our ability to pivot all of our programs to be relevant and impactful during all of this. I would get more specific when you share that, Casey. I think that was a question, but talk about the impact of those pivots. When you pivoted, what did that mean for your programs? Tell those stories about what you've done over the last 6 and 7 months to keep your program and to keep your service going, and then ask for them to support that so you can continue that into 2021. Hopefully that helps. And then Adam shared as a best practice that they're going to ask for small amounts, like $10, and ask for people to challenge 10 friends. That's an awesome idea. That's something we'll get to later as we talk about plans as well, is the peer-to-peer fundraising model, which is booming right now. So that's a great suggestion. Okay, so 9 of you have, 45% have an end of year giving plan, 20% do not. 5% don't know what an end of year giving plan year is, and that might be because of the acronym. And then 30% want to know if writing it on a napkin counts. So this is great. So for those of you that have an end of year giving plan, I hope when I get to that portion of the presentation that you'll insert anything that I've missed. And then for those of you that don't have one or want to know if writing it on a napkin counts, I've got some information coming for you that I hope will help get you launched.
Lisa, we did have one comment in the chat of they have one, but they're not sure. They're not sure of its prospects as to whether or not it will be successful. So I don't know if you're going to touch on that, but there was a kind of point made in the chat on that.
Yep, and I hear that. That goes back to that flexibility, and you can have a plan, but you might have to burn it all down in the next couple of weeks where, I mean, who knows what's around the corner? So great to have a plan, but I would encourage you to continue to attend sessions like this as you can, or just kind of keep your eye on other nonprofits in your area or, you know, in your region, or folks that are doing the same work and see what they're doing as well. I think in my 17 years in fundraising, I think I've watched this field adapt and innovate and turn corners faster than I ever have in my entire career. So I think it's having that plan, but keeping your eyes up and your head on a swivel and just being ready for the next thing. I know that's not helpful in terms of specifics, but I think it's just the way that we need to approach these next few weeks. So let's talk about making a plan. Let's make a plan now. I would encourage you, if you don't have a plan now, to make it your goal to have one by November 1st or November 2nd, which is the first business day in November. And I would also encourage you to have it done before the election. I know we're talking at River Network about just the unanticipated kind of things that are going to go on that week of the election and maybe into the next week. You may have to be putting out fires or dealing with some things personally and professionally. So I just encourage you to have your plan done by November 2nd. So when we talk about that plan, lock in those dates now, make your timeline. And again, I'll share an example, a sample of one in a minute. But again, have that flexibility. If you set your annual appeal typically around, the week of Thanksgiving or something like that, bump it up a week. We're all hearing stories about the slowdown of the U.S. Postal Service. I imagine it could get worse as people start their holiday shopping. So just pad in some extra time for anything as you make this plan. When you have the plan and as you're creating it, now is a great time to recruit your colleagues, your board, and other volunteers, and maybe even other donors to help with these efforts. Can they make those gratitude phone calls that we talked about? Can they send a thank you note? Can they send a postcard? Will they share a social media post? To Adam's point, can they start their own fundraiser, a Facebook fundraiser, or some sort of challenge to their friends? Have those conversations now and help those folks make a plan to be able to help you so that when it's really busy in November and December, they are set up for success and are excited and engaged along with you. So for those of you that in the poll said you don't have enough staff or you don't have enough time, here's where you can tentacle out and reach out to those folks to help you with this end of the year effort. Take time now to update your messaging and your imagery. So again, go back to that relevance piece. What have you done in the last 6 months that has continued to make your organization relevant? What do you need from the donors to continue to make that impact? And what are the images that you're using? I would highly encourage you not to use images with a lot of people in a room or with people engaging in ways that we just don't right now. I feel like when we see those images now, it can be a little jarring. So update your messaging and imagery so that it's really relevant with everything that we're going through right now. Prep for Giving Tuesday and other local giving days. Giving Tuesday is that first Tuesday in December. I believe it's the 1st this year. If you haven't been to their website, they have loads of materials for you, social media posts, scripts, challenges, all sorts of resources. It's all free. It's a gold mine to prep for Giving Tuesday. And go back to that staff, board, and volunteers. How can they help you with Giving Tuesday and other local giving days that you might have in your region? Can you make a quick Giving Tuesday toolkit? So maybe just a one-pager, sharing with those folks how they can help you on Giving Tuesday. Again, is it making phone calls? Is it posting on social media? Is it reaching out to donors to encourage them to give? Can you find a donor that will provide a match for that day? And start making those plans now, again, so that in the days leading up to that, you can focus on the last minute details and not feel overwhelmed trying to get that plan together. Make a plan for your end of year appeal, but again, keep in mind that you may need to tweak as you go in terms of messaging, depending on what the last 7 to 8 weeks of the year look like. And consider, if you haven't already, to use multiple mediums this year to reach people. So we all know direct mail, it can be the bread and butter for your organization, but I would encourage you, if you're not already, to flank that with an email, with a text, if you have a texting program, with social media posts, And again, with those Facebook fundraisers, people are consuming information in lots of different ways right now. Let's give them the opportunity to consume in the way they want. It's okay if the message on all of those things is similar or the same, because you're not sure, unless you've already polled or surveyed your donors, kind of how your donors are wanting to receive that information right now. And again, make a contingency plan and be flexible. I cannot stress that enough.
Hey, Lisa, we got a question in the chat.
Wonderful.
From Becca. She says, we currently do a membership drive in the spring and at the end of the year with specific amounts for individuals, families, and businesses, and then a blank space for donations. I've noticed that lots of other organizations have a list of amounts so that a donor can choose the amount that they give without membership categories. Is there a good reason to choose one way or the other?
Becca, can you tell us in the chat, are you saying that you're using their donation level from last year and pre-filling that? Or Brenna, if you are interpreting that question different than I am, I don't know that I completely understand.
The way that I read it, and just to give Becca a minute to either come on, take herself off of mute and off the video, or to type in the chat room, was that they ask for a donation that gives them a membership as well as any amount that they want to go over that membership. And then others are just saying, can you just give us an amount without including any information about membership? And then what I would assume an organization would do is they'd put some of it towards the membership and the rest of it would be for anything else.
Got it. I'm a big fan. We actually just revamped the River Network giving site to include some suggested donation amounts. And then we even put a line in there that says, you know, most people give, I think it was $42 a month. There's a lot of good that comes out of kind of norming in fundraising, if that makes sense. And so I feel like it's good to give people options and not assume that whatever your membership ask is all they're willing to give. So I would encourage you to do the second of those in that question and to give them a list of amounts, because you again, it's about not making assumptions about your donors. You know, what if you're asking for, let's say, $20 for your membership? What if you have a donor out there that's willing or wanting to make a $100 gift or a $500 gift? Let's not, and I understand what you were doing with the extra donation, but I think there's something visually about seeing those things together that research has shown when you give people those options. Again, there's some social norming around that. If there's already a box that says that, it means someone must be giving at those levels, and it starts to you know, trigger that part of their brain as they're making those decisions. So, and here's another thing, Becca, is try it this year, and then I'd encourage you to compare it to years past. I think, again, it's a good time to innovate and try new things. I know that can seem scary right now with all the uncertainty, but I also think it's a good time to change things up. I hope that answered your question.
Great. We have yes, it seems like it did. Thank you, Lisa. We have a question from Abel. Can you recommend a giving portal or website add-on service that is fairly easy to use from both an administrative side and user side? He doesn't have a donate option on the website. Is there a 501c3 centric service that exists?
That's a great question, Abel. I'm going to put my my email address here in the chat. And will you please email me that? Because I actually am lucky to have a marketing and communications director who handles that side. I think the service that we use is fairly user-friendly on both sides. I'd encourage you to go to our website to see if you agree on at least on the user side, and let me ask her what she thinks on the administrative side. And I'd be happy to share that with you if you want to drop me an email. That's a great question. And of course, if anyone else has recommendations for a service they're using, please add those in the chat. Wonderful. I love the questions and the conversation. Thank you for being so interactive today. Okay, so let's talk about new opportunities. I said, now is the time when we can innovate and try new things. And here are ways that I think fundraising has new opportunities this season. Millennials are being more generous than any other donor segment in fundraising since the beginning of COVID. There's been research done by several different organizations, and this is true in both cases. And so think about, again, your messaging and how you're communicating out with people. Do you think what you're doing is reaching that audience? So that's, the 20s and the 30 somethings that might be interested in your program's mission and impact. Think about these next 7 to 8 weeks. How can you engage that audience? Do you have donors or volunteers or board members or staff members that fit this profile that can help you as you create your plan? Say, you want to get donations from me and my friends? Here's how you do it. Reach out to those folks because there's a lot of potential. And as you think about the sustainability and long-term game here, so we're talking about navigating year-end giving, but all of this should set your organization up for the long term. Here's a great way to do that, is to engage those younger generations right now as donors and volunteers in your organization. I talked a little bit earlier about donor advised funds, DAF. As I said, there was a poll of some of the largest community foundations in the country recently, and it was something like 45% growth in the donor advised funds held at those community foundations. This is an opportunity to go to those donors who have donor advised funds, and maybe you put it as a PS in your annual appeal if you don't know who those donors are. This is their rainy day. So, in those cases, a lot of those donors are spending, a certain percentage every year. This is a time to ask them to step up. This is the rainy day. The rainy day is here. This is what these funds were created for. And I saw a great example of an organization that sent out a customized ask to those with donor advised funds, asking them to cover the shortage from your annual donors or your membership drive. So, and it went over really well. So let's think about, those folks that may be struggling with unemployment right now, or, for whatever reason, they haven't given their annual gifts to you. These donor advised funds are a great way to try to make up that lost revenue. And so these come into your organization, if you're not familiar, through things like a Fidelity charitable account, from a Schwab charitable account. There's many out there. If you're seeing those checks come from those kind of organizations, those are donor advised funds, and you should segment those donors. I forget who asked that question earlier. Was it Kathy? About how to segment donors. Here's one really great way to do that. The Zoom tours, coffee chats, and appreciation events. So again, here's an opportunity to be innovative. Can you ask your CEO, your executive director, or your program staff to host a Zoom call or a coffee chat to talk about what's exciting and what's new in your organization? We haven't had donors through our door. We haven't been able to have these, fundraising events or breakfasts or lunches where we gather people and tell our story. How can you tell your story virtually right now? One organization had a new facility open, and so they did a video tour of the new facility. Is there something like that where you can show impact to folks, even though you can't be across the table or they can't be sitting at your event? New crisis donors. Do you have new donors that have come on in the last 6 to 7 months because they were compelled to help your organization? Reach out to them again and talk about their why for your organization, and share with them your impact, and see if there's an opportunity to ask for another gift. I wouldn't do this in a blanket way. I would do this in a one-on-one way. There's a reason that they came to your organization. And, Adam was talking about that earlier. As you're competing with these other kind of frontline organizations, they came to you for some reason. So dig into that if you haven't already, and understand their why. There may be a major donor that you can cultivate through that came in new through this crisis. We talked about this a couple times, donor or volunteer-led fundraisers, so Facebook fundraisers. I've seen a couple folks do GoFundMe. We've had a board member do that for us. I know there is some fees involved with that, but it was a wonderful way to get some new money into the organization and then to get some new prospects. So those folks are now in our database and they're receiving our newsletter, and we're able to cultivate them as new donors to our organization. So who can you pick out from your volunteers, from your board, from your donors that might be willing to do that over the next 7 to 8 weeks for your organization? We've talked a little bit about donor segmenting across the way, but you might need to reconsider who your major donor is. So for example, if we're sending out annual reports or impact reports to donors of $1,000 and above in a normal year, maybe we're doing that to our donors $500 and above this year. So look at those gifts that have come in over the course of the calendar year and think about kind of who you can love on, again, who could use some stewardship pieces that maybe wouldn't get them otherwise, and add them to that pool of who you're treating as a major donor in your organization. And then finally, the CARES Act. If you're not talking about the CARES Act in your year-end appeal, I think you're missing some education for your donors in terms of what's going on with tax deductions currently. I've got some language here that I pulled from the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America at wish.org/stimulus. They've got some great language here that you could pull and move into those solicitation letters or add to your website or share again in an email. Just make sure that you're talking about the CARES Act, because they're hearing it from other nonprofits as well, maybe, but great to be of value to your donors. And in this case, you can. If they're not completely understanding this, as they think, you know, some donors only give at the end of the year. And so maybe they haven't thought this through, or maybe they haven't seen this yet. Share this with them in terms of how this legislation can benefit them and their philanthropy this year.
Hey, Lisa, we had a question in the chat about ways of communicating with your donors. So you touched on all the number of ways that folks can communicate, and to some of the nonprofit organizations that can seem very overwhelming, all of the choices.
Yeah.
So they asked, if you could only do 3 things, what would you recommend?
I would mail, I would email, and I would use your social media. I think those 3, even though there was a lot of noise in there, and I apologize for that, but I do think it's a good time to tinker with some things as well to flank those. But I think we know direct mail is still, I kind of expected this to go away at some point in my career. I don't know why, but it's still just such a powerful way for people to give. And then I think, again, flanking that with an email. So I wouldn't send one or the other in those cases. I think the best case scenario is you send both ways to folks. Again, it's a busy time. People are inundated with information. Let's not lose the opportunity to get our message in front of people. And then again, if we're going to capture the younger generation, let's use social media to see if we can get in front of the millennial group.
And then Lisa, this came up actually from someone in our network separate from this webinar, but they wanted to ask about phone use. Are calling your donors, and I know that this was something that we recommended in the spring, just calling to check in, not even asking for anything, but just to say, hey, we're just checking in to see how you're doing. Is that part of a end of year giving plan?
It is, and I recommended that, and I'll show you the plan in a second,
okay,
as a way to show gratitude, not to make an ask. So I would schedule those, and again, things are going to get tricky here with the election, but I think there's a window of opportunity the week after the election, before Thanksgiving, where your ask should go out sometime in that time frame. And even as that's going out the door, you can make these calls just to check in, just to say hi, just to say thank you. And again, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to engage your board, to engage your non-fundraising staff, and to engage any volunteers that want to do this. We've heard, even for those folks who aren't reached, so there's a voicemail left, for example. And I've heard the volunteers say to me, I don't even know if that made a difference. And when I picked up the phone in March and we're talking to people, they were talking about those thank you calls that came in November and December and how meaningful they were, even if they weren't able to take the call. So yes, get on the phone, write those thank you notes. Let's thank people. It's, November is this like wonderful month to show gratitude with Thanksgiving. You can, take the Thanksgiving holiday with however you want to take it, but I think you can theme November as this month of gratitude before you move into this really kind of crazy wrapping up the end of your calendar year giving time when you're going back and having to make those asks. Great question.
Great, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, let's get into that sample plan. And again, these slides will be available after this presentation for you to download. And I made this with, I think, the group that we have here in mind. So again, if you have a larger shop and have some more capabilities, you're probably going to have some more things in here, but I also didn't want to overwhelm those of you that may not have a plan. So let's talk about what to do now. What do we do between now and November 1st? Let's update, scrub, meaning are there folks that are deceased that are on your giving list? Are there folks that have asked not to be contacted that are on your giving list? Let's look at those mailing lists in your database right now and clean it up and segment it as you can. I know there was a question about that earlier. Again, can you segment by your monthly donors, by your annual donors that might be the kind of lower level guests? Do you have planned giving donors that you can segment? Can you go through and identify those donor advice fund gifts that came in and segment those, your database now, and think about the messaging that is specific to each of those segments so that you're ready to roll in November. Create scripts or toolkits for those donor stewardship calls and for Giving Tuesday. Again, this is empowering those volunteers and non-fundraising staff members to help you during November and December. So take time now to equip them. Maybe it's a 30-minute Zoom call where you can get on and talk about the importance and the impact of these thank you calls and get them really excited about them. And then just give them a short script to launch these calls with folks, whether it's again in November or if you're making those calls on Giving Tuesday. Recruit those volunteers and communicate with your colleagues about your plans and upcoming engagement opportunities. So I'm taking the time to do this during our November staff call. I've asked for 5 or 10 minutes on the agenda to share with everyone what we're doing over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And again, to ask them to engage and be involved and to help. And then look to identify a matching gift opportunity for Giving Tuesday or for that final December push, which you'll see at the end of this plan. Who is a donor that would be willing to do this and would be excited about it? I think the best case scenario is when you can find a donor that you think it would help with their cultivation and then also give your organization that extra money to leverage. Matches on Giving Tuesday are such a wonderful way to get people excited and to double the impact of their gift that day. And then as we get into November, again, those donor stewardship calls that we just talked about, I would encourage you to mail your annual appeal the week of actually November 8th or November 15th. I wouldn't wait until the week of Thanksgiving if you've done that in the past. I think the earlier the better this year to give you and your organization time to follow up as needed on those solicitations. I highly encourage a thank you note or an email the week of Thanksgiving, again, showing gratitude in whatever way we can throughout the month. We did something for the Giving Tuesday Now in the spring, where we asked our board members to tell their story about why they gave to our organization. Those are great videos or testimonials to share on your Facebook page, on your social media sites, on your website, to show examples of why other folks are giving to your organization, and again, to say thank you. And then you're going to want to ramp up your email and your social media efforts if you have them that week before Giving Tuesday. Again, that's December 1st. And so it's right on the heels of Thanksgiving this year. And so you're just going to have to time that, do some posts probably at the beginning of the Thanksgiving week and then again on that Monday, maybe even on that Sunday before. December, we start it right out with Giving Tuesday. So make a plan for Giving Tuesday and for follow-up. You're going to want to thank those donors right away, and thanking them in the middle of the chaos of getting your annual appeal and following up with those donors can be overwhelming. So make that plan now. Can you automate that now so that there's an easy way for you to get those acknowledgements out the door once they come in? You're going to want to spend time on annual appeal follow-up. Should you schedule or block time on your CEO's calendar for times in December when they can call and follow up with donors who haven't yet given and usually do during this time? Same with lapsed donor follow-up. Set aside that time in December, set it aside now so that you have time on your calendar and program staff, CEO, whoever else needs to be involved to do that outreach to lapsed donors. And then again, consider that matching gift opportunity for December 29th through the 31st. I think we're still going to have that same kind of end of the year rush where people are kind of realizing it's the end of the year and might have a better idea of their tax situation, whatever motivates people to wait for those last 3 days. We know it happens. I read a story recently about an organization that gets 20% of their annual revenue from December 29th through the 31st. So think about a match to motivate folks. And it might even be folks that are giving for a second time this year. But don't forget about those kind of last 3 days of the year as well. Any questions or any ideas, anything I missed on those plans for those of you that have them?
While people are considering what they're going to type into the chat box, Lisa, we did have a question. What is the best way to present the value of giving to a tiny fledgling organization where the work is being completed by a few individuals? How to explain why invest in a growing and establishing a larger organization?
Great question. I think you have people who are cheering for the little guy right now, honestly. So I think tell the story about how the impact of their dollars goes so far in your organization right now, and that the donors and investments from people like them are the reason that you're able to grow and to vision a future that is a larger organization. I think you'll find people are attracted to digging in and helping and being part of something. So I would create a story around, engaging and welcoming them into your community and being some part of something bigger than themselves. I think there's plenty of donors out there that would be attracted to doing something like that, especially right now. And again, going back to those millennial donors, that's exactly what they want. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to be involved. They want to create. That's a really great audience for you to tell that story to as well. That's a great question.
That's all we have in the chat box at the moment, Lisa.
Awesome. Okay, so next steps. Let's take action today. We're going to finalize or create, I should have put that in it, create and or finalize your end of the year plan. We're going to recruit those volunteers to help execute the end of the year plan. Update your messaging and your imagery. Plan for the follow-up and stewardship of those new donors. Plan that now so that it doesn't feel cramped in December. And then I, again, just want to encourage you to plan time to rest. I've got 2 days between now and the holiday break where I'm just going to take the day off and regroup and then jump back in. So can you plan those days now? Can you take some vacation days? And I'm talking just like unplug from everything. Can you plan those now so that we're not getting to December 31st and you're so fried and so burnt out that you can't even handle it. Again, I think this has been the most volatile time I've seen in the fundraising industry since I've been involved. And I just want to recognize what that means for all of us carrying that load for our organizations. And I just want to encourage you again to take time to take care of yourself through this.
So Lisa, I'm sharing the stimulus link in the chat box from the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America, but for a small organization that's all volunteer run, do you have any specifics on simple messaging that they can use around the CARES Act? Is it simply your donation will go twice as far as it would have in years previous, or something along those lines?
In this case, it's more about what it means to the donor. So in the case of the CARES Act, it's a benefit to the donor because of the way that the legislation was written, that they can deduct in ways that they couldn't previously. And that website that you shared they have word for word language that you could literally cut and paste and put as a PS at the end of your annual appeal, or drop onto your website if you have one. So I would go there. I'm sure if you Google, there are other great examples. I happen to have a friend that worked at Make-A-Wish, and I know how well established they are at fundraising. And so I went there first just to see what they were doing. And it was super simple and easy to just pull. And Brenna, I think you pasted the evaluation, but would just love to hear in the chat as well if we hit our mark today. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you have some best practices to move forward with. I hope you feel like I gave you some tools to plan, and I hope you are going to take some immediate action steps now to help make November and December successful and hopefully a little lighter for all of you.
Yeah, Lisa, we're getting lots of thank yous in the chat box. Several people feel this is very timely and that this was incredibly helpful as they're running to their next video call / meeting.
Wonderful.
All right, everyone. Well, this